My family stole $93,000 from my card for a luxury cruise while I paid their bills. But when I found out my lazy 5-year-old brother signed the receipts, I reported them for fraud, and now he has his wages garnished for decades. They lost their house, and my mother calls me a monster. I'm 29 years old, work as a creative director in Chicago, and honestly, I need to tell this story because what my family did to me basically forced me to cut ties with them in the most brutal way possible. And I don't regret it. Truth be told, although sometimes at night I wonder if I went too far, but then I remember everything that happened, and I think, no, they completely brought this on themselves. I guess I should start by explaining how we got to this point. I was always the responsible son, the one who got good grades, the one who went to college, the one who got a good job after graduating. My younger brother, Zachary, who's 25 now, was always my mom's golden child. And when I say golden child, I mean he could literally do whatever he wanted without consequences. Fail classes, not show up to jobs, stay home playing video games all day, and my mom always had some excuse for him, that he was finding himself, that he needed time to find his passion, all that kind of stuff. That basically means he's lazy, but nobody wants to admit it. When I got my job as creative director like 4 years ago, I started making good money, like really good money for someone my age. And that's when the problem started, although I didn't see it coming at the time. My mom called me one day and told me my dad had to reduce his hours at work because of health problems, which was true, and that they were struggling a bit with bills. She asked if I could help them with the mortgage that month, just that once, until they got stable. Obviously, I said yes because they're my parents, right? And I thought it was temporary. But just that once turned into every month. I started giving them like $2,000 monthly for the mortgage, and then a bit more for other things. My dad's car needed repairs, the heating broke down, Zachary needed a new phone because his fell in the pool at a party. There was always something. And I kept paying because I thought, well, I have the money, they raised me. It's the right thing to do. My dad is quieter, like the family peacemaker. So he never said much about the whole situation, just accepted my help with a sad smile that broke my heart. What bothered me was Zachary. That bastard, sorry, but there's no other way to describe him, lived at my parents' house, without paying rent, without having a job, spending all day playing video games in his room. He had his super expensive gaming setup that, guess who paid for? Yeah, me. Because my mom convinced me it would help with his self-esteem. Every time I went to visit my parents, there he was, in sweatpants and a t-shirt, yelling into his microphone while playing Fortnite or whatever. And my mom always with, he's looking for work, it's difficult in this economy, but I knew it was a lie because I'd seen him reject job offers saying they were beneath him. So I kept helping financially for years. Honestly, I got used to it. It was part of my monthly budget. I went out with my friends, traveled a bit, had my own nice apartment in a good neighborhood, and I still had enough left over to help my family. I thought that's just how things were, that it was my responsibility because I'd been successful and they hadn't. But then the cruise thing happened. It was a normal Tuesday. I was in a meeting reviewing some designs for a client when the bank called me. Jonathan, the representative, asked me if I had authorized a $50,000 charge to a travel agency. I froze. I told him no, definitely not, that it must be an error or fraud. He told me they were going to investigate, but that it seemed legitimate because the security code had been used correctly and everything. I asked him to send me the details by email and hung up, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. I checked my email on my phone right there in the meeting, and sure enough, there it was. A $50,000 charge to Mediterranean Dreams travel agency dated 2 days earlier. Almost $50,000 for a Mediterranean cruise. And then it clicked. A cruise. My mom had been talking for months about how she'd always dreamed of taking a cruise through Europe, how nice it would be for the whole family to go together. I always changed the subject because, who had $50,000 for a cruise? Apparently I did, according to my family. I left the meeting with some excuse and called my mom. She answered all happy, like too happy, and I directly told her, "Mom, did you use my credit card to buy a cruise?" There was silence. And then I heard Zachary in the background saying something like, "Did you tell him yet?" My mom started with how she was going to tell me that it was a surprise, that she thought I'd like the idea of all of us going together as a family. I yelled at her, "I don't care if it's a surprise. It's $50,000 that you didn't authorize. That's fraud. It's literally theft." She started crying and told me I had the money, that it wasn't a big deal, that I'd always been so selfish with my success. Selfish. Me, who had been giving them $2,000 a month for years, plus all the extra expenses, was selfish because I was upset. They spent $50,000 of my money without permission. She hung up on me and I just stood there in my office parking lot, feeling like I was in a nightmare. I called my dad, but he didn't answer. Later, I found out my mom had convinced him everything would be fine, that I would understand, that it was for the good of the family. That night, I went to their house. I didn't even knock, just walked in with my key because technically it was still my childhood home and my parents never asked me to return the key. Zachary was in the living room watching TV, and when he saw me come in, he didn't even get up. Just said, "Hey bro, what's up?" I asked him if he knew about the cruise, and he said, "Yeah, it's going to be awesome. I've never been to Europe," like it was the most normal thing in the world. I told him they'd used my card without permission, and he just shrugged and said, "Mom said you were going to pay." My parents came downstairs, and my mom immediately started with the guilt. That after everything they'd done for me, that I was their son, that family helps each other, that it was just money. My dad was quiet, looking at the floor, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I hated him a little for being so weak, for letting my mom manipulate everything like that. I asked my mom how exactly they'd gotten my card and security code. She turned red and admitted she'd seen my card in my wallet when I visited them the month before, took a photo, and memorized the security code because I'd written it on a post-it on my desk. Years ago, when I moved, and she helped me. I couldn't believe it. I literally couldn't believe my own mother had planned this so far in advance. I told her I was going to dispute the charge with the bank, that I was going to report it as fraud. She yelled at me that if I did that, I'd get them in legal trouble. How could I do that to my own family? Zachary finally got up from the couch and told me to stop being so dramatic, that it was just money and I made enough. That broke me completely. I told him he had no right to have an opinion about my money when he'd gone years without working a single day, basically living off my charity. I left there that night swearing I was going to fix this. The next day I went to the bank in person. Jonathan was very professional and explained the whole process for disputing the charge. I signed a bunch of papers declaring it was fraud, that I hadn't authorized the transaction. And then Jonathan looked at my account more thoroughly and found something else. Other charges I hadn't noticed because they were smaller, distributed over the last 6 months. Amounts of $500 here, $1,000, $200 there, $3,000 for a new TV, $5,000 for I don't know what. In total, besides the cruise, there were like $43,000 more in unauthorized charges. $93,000 total that my family had spent from my card. I felt physically sick. Jonathan asked me if I was okay, and I had to run to the bank bathroom to throw up. When I came back, he very kindly offered me water and explained they were going to investigate all the charges, that it would probably take a few weeks. He asked me if I wanted to press criminal charges against whoever was responsible. I told him I needed to think about it, but I already knew the answer. Yes, I was going to do it. That night I created a group text with my parents and Zachary. I didn't call, didn't go in person, just wrote a long message explaining I discovered all the unauthorized charges that the bank was investigating, and that from that moment on, I was cutting off all financial help. $0 more for the mortgage, 0 for repairs, 0 for anything that they should manage on their own. My mom called me immediately screaming, but I didn't answer. Zachary sent me like 20 messages saying I was overreacting, that we were family. I blocked them all. The next few weeks were weird. I focused on work, like really immersed myself in projects so I wouldn't think about everything. I decided to move too. Look for a new apartment closer to downtown, farther from where my parents lived. I found an incredible place in a new building with all the amenities. More expensive than where I was, but who cared? Now I had an extra $2,000 a month that I used to give to my family. The bank eventually confirmed all the charges were fraudulent according to my statement. They reversed the transactions and returned the money to me. But here comes the interesting part. The bank had to investigate where that money went. And it turns out the travel agency had already processed everything. The cruise was paid for, non-refundable. So the agency now had a problem. They'd provided the service, but the payment was reversed. So they started going after my family for the money. My cousin Samantha, who was always the family gossip, kept me updated on everything that was happening. According to her, debt collectors started calling my parents' house like 10 times a day. They called my mom, my dad. They even got Zachary's number and called him too. They wanted their $50,000 for the cruise plus interest and penalties. And the other businesses also started looking for the money from the other reversed charges. So my family suddenly owed like $93,000 plus interest to various companies that weren't going to let it go. Zachary, according to Samantha, had to get a job. His first job in years, at 25 years old, was at a diner flipping burgers. I'm not going to lie. I felt satisfaction when I found out. But it only lasted like 2 weeks, because according to him, the manager was too strict and didn't like him being late. They fired him, and he was unemployed again, but now with debt collectors harassing him. My parents started falling behind on the mortgage. Without my $2,000 monthly, and with my dad working only part-time, they couldn't cover everything. The bank sent them notices that they were going to foreclose if they didn't catch up. My mom even showed up at my new apartment one day. I don't know how she got the address. Probably Samantha gave it to her. She knocked on my door crying, with my dad behind her looking defeated. I opened the door, but didn't let them in. We stood in the hallway, and she begged me, literally on her knees, begged me to help them, that they were going to lose the house, that this was my fault for disputing the charges. I told her no, that they had made decisions and now faced the consequences. My dad finally spoke and told me, "Son, I understand you're angry, but we're your family. You can't leave us on the street." I told him yes I could, that they stole from me, that they used my trust and my money to live beyond their means, and that especially they'd allowed Zachary to become a useless parasite. My mom got up from the floor and yelled at me that I was a monster, that I'd never liked Zachary, that I'd always been jealous of him. I laughed, literally laughed in her face. I told her, "Jealous of what? Of an unemployed 5-year-old who lives with his parents? Please." They left after that, and I haven't seen them in person since. Eventually, they lost the house. Samantha told me they sold it before the bank foreclosed, but since they owed so much on the mortgage, they had almost nothing left from the sale. They moved to a small apartment in a not very good area of the city. My dad had to look for a full-time job at an auto parts store, something that's physically hard for him, but he needs the money. My mom got a job as a receptionist at a dental clinic. And Zachary finally, after debt collectors threatened to sue him, got a job at a warehouse. But here comes the best part, or the worst depending on how you see it. The debt collectors did sue him. They took Zachary to court for the $93,000. My mom tried to say she was responsible too, but legally, since Zachary had signed for some of the products that were bought with my card, he was considered part of the fraud. The judge ruled against him. Obviously. They ordered him to pay the $93,000 plus court costs, which were another $7,000 or something like that. $100,000 that my 5-year-old brother, making like $15 an hour at a warehouse, has to pay. They started garnishing his wages. Every 2 weeks, part of his check goes directly to paying that debt. And he's going to be paying for years, like decades probably. Samantha sent me photos she saw on Facebook of when they repossessed his car. Some guys from a repo company grabbed it from his work parking lot in front of all his co-workers. Zachary posted something dramatic on social media about how life was unfair, how his brother had betrayed him. Some cousins commented supporting him. Others sent me private messages saying, "I did the right thing." The truth is, I don't care what anyone else thinks. Sometimes, like I said at the beginning, I wonder if I should have handled things differently. Maybe I could have talked more with them. Maybe I could have made a payment plan or something. But then I think about those years I spent paying for everything, being the good son, the responsible one, while Zachary did nothing and my parents allowed it. I think about how they planned to steal $93,000 from me, how my mom literally memorized my security code months earlier, and no, I don't feel bad. Zachary is now like 26, still working at the warehouse. According to Samantha, he matured a bit. I mean, he doesn't post stupid stuff on social media anymore, and at least he keeps the job. But he still lives with my parents in that tiny apartment, paying off his debt little by little. My parents are fine, I guess. They work, pay their bills. They can't afford luxuries anymore. My mom sent me a message last Christmas. It just said, "Merry Christmas, son. I miss you." I didn't respond. Sometimes I run into acquaintances or distant relatives who ask me why I don't talk to my family anymore. I tell them it's complicated and change the subject. I don't need to justify myself to anyone. I know what I did and why I did it. I established boundaries I should have established years ago. My family saw me as an ATM, especially my mom and Zachary, and I let that happen for a long time because of guilt and a misguided sense of family obligation. Now, I live my life. I go out with my friends, travel when I want, invested in better furniture for my apartment. I've had a girlfriend for a few months who doesn't know the whole story yet, but eventually, I'm going to tell her. I wonder what she'll think. If she'll think I'm too harsh or that I did the right thing, I guess I'll find out at some point. The only thing that bothers me sometimes is thinking about my dad. He wasn't the instigator of all this. He was more like a passenger in my mom's plan. But he didn't defend me either, didn't put a stop to anything. He chose to remain neutral. And in the end, that was also a choice. So no, I don't feel bad for him either. Last week, Samantha told me Zachary asked for a raise at his job, and they denied it. He started arguing with his boss, saying he'd been there over a year and deserved more money, that he had debts to pay. The boss told him his performance was barely average, and that maybe in 6 months they'd consider a small raise. Zachary almost quit right there but held back because obviously he needs the job. I laughed when Samantha told me that. Maybe it sounds cruel, but after years of seeing him do nothing, of indirectly financing his laziness, knowing that now he has to swallow his pride and work like everyone else, gives me a certain satisfaction. And I guess that's it. My family is paying the consequences of their actions. I'm living my life without the burden of supporting them financially. I don't know if someday I'm going to forgive them or if I'm going to have a relationship with them again. Honestly, I don't think so. What they did wasn't a mistake. It was a conscious decision to rob me and take advantage of me, and I made the conscious decision to cut them off completely. That's how things are now.